Hey IT friends, how's it going? Based on a recent conversation I had with one of the most profound people I've gotten to meet in the channel, 𝘂𝗍𝗄 over at Empath, I was inspired to make another video. Thanks, Keith. I'm going to keep stealing your ideas, Keith. So I want to talk a little bit and blend a few things that I've talked about in the past, kind of combine them together into one sort of general concept. This idea, making people feel smart, and combining that with the concepts of reciprocity, and honestly, combining that with the concepts of jealousy and envy. And I bring all these things together because typically we hear these in a sales and marketing context, which I'll briefly touch on in a minute. And they're certainly useful there. But more importantly, well, I'm an ops guy. And so why would a technician, an ops person, is somebody that's cost of goods sold in an MSP or a vendor also care about these ideas? And what you'll find and I've found this throughout my technical career, and as a brief bit of foreshadowing, when you possess a skill or a piece of knowledge that is not perceived to be common, that can end up, as I've talked about in previous videos, causing people to regard you as either just a help or as some great unapproachable, wizard or warlock in a tower, completely unfathomable to mankind. And in either case, it can foster a very subtle sense of technological envy and jealousy that the more astute help desk technicians amongst all of you have noticed when try to help a client understand something when something's wrong and they get mad at you and think that you're patronizing them. You know exactly what I mean. So I want to talk a little bit about sort of the subtle science and art behind that, maybe how to avoid that happening and how it might help you influence your clients, partners, and coworkers to arrive at the outcomes that we want for them, which is to have a happy and productive experience with their technology and not to be angry and frustrated. Let's talk first about this idea of making people feel smart, because that ultimately is what we can coalesce the rest of this conversation around. And I think it's the area of this conversation that will be most comfortable, and if you're new to this whole idea, be the thing you like the most. So quite simply, other humans like to feel smart, right? We know this. And we can make 1,000 videos on the psychology of this, and just in general, so many biases that we all fall victim to, all feed back into this general idea that we want to be rewarded. We want that dopamine hit, that our brain was correct and we were therefore smart or right or however you want to phrase that our views, our judgment, what we were thinking or what we were doing was the right thing. We want that validation. I'm boiling that down to people like to feel smart. And I think that's a pretty easy concept to understand because we've all felt that way. Every single human everywhere has felt that way. And interestingly enough, if you do look around at other relatively high cognitive functioning animals, your dog, your cat, maybe a dolphin, a monkey, whatever, they exhibit the exact same behavior. They visibly receive a dopamine hit from basically being smart, from making the right choice, from the right decision. Given that we know this is common amongst pretty much anything that can think, well, great. What does that do for me, Dean? Well, importantly with humans is humans will remember somebody that made them feel smart, especially if you're one of the first people that's made somebody feel smart about a particular topic. They'll hold on to that feeling for a very long time, and they will remember that feeling and that dopamine hit for an incredibly long time, far longer than they will remember the actual information, content, or context that led to that feeling. If you're in a position where you can make people feel smart, that can be an incredibly influential position. So given that we're kind of going to accept that as a fact, well, great. So what does that mean? Like I just become a professor, I run around and I teach people things? It's not what I mean. Not what I mean. What you need to do is you need to start to figure out, how do I allow somebody to feel validated that their decision making was correct? That's really what you're going for. That their decision making was correct. It was the right decision. It doesn't necessarily mean that they are academically intelligent or smart about the subject. It's you are rewarding with a dopamine hit that their decision to do a thing was the right decision. And when you define it that way, well, gosh, that opens up a whole world of being able to apply this. And as we talked about in sales and marketing, this can be just as simple as, you know, if a new MSP client works at their MSP and very early on you make their environment, you know, markedly better to operate in, they're likely to recognize that they made the right decision to do business with you. Therefore, they will feel smart. That's what I'm talking about. But it can be a lot more transactional and a lot smaller than that. The case of being a technician, a help desk technician, something that can simply be just simply rewarding that client with exceptional service and making them feel smart for reaching out to you. You've all experienced this in that weird way, right? Like, if you're under the age of, I don't know, 45, I'm sure there's people over 45, but if you're from the generation I'm from, of people who don't want to talk to other humans on the phone or any other way, because for some reason we all grew up afraid of other people, you know what I mean. You've been somewhere like in a store doing something and you just can't find a thing that you want to find. And you've looked on the app, you've read the directory, you've exhausted every option that doesn't involve talking to a person. And then finally you ask someone who works there and they instantly know what you want and where it is and they show it to you. And in that moment you have that dopamine hit, and in your brain you probably chastise yourself slightly for like, I should have asked them sooner, but you feel smart for finally asking someone for help because you were instantly rewarded with exactly what you needed. It's that feeling. And as a help desk technician, or as an MSP employee, a vendor employee, a technical employee, that's really what you can do for your clients consistently. You can make them feel validated that they made the right choice in that moment to decide to ask you for help, rather than waiting around and continuing to tinker or troubleshoot or fix it themselves. Keith was telling me a story that there were around the time when the United States was first getting founded as an independent country, some of our early political leaders who were around in Europe politicking had a lot of political rivals. People didn't really like them. People didn't like these upstart rebels from across the pond that were causing trouble. And one of the common tactics that some of our politicians used when they were overseas was, if they had a political opponent, they would ask that political opponent to borrow a book. At that time, books were pretty rare, pretty valuable. They're still pretty valuable, just not as rare. And the idea behind this was a couple-fold. So there was an idea of reciprocity, that if you simply ask someone to do a series of small favors for you, the person being asked to do the favors will like you more. And that ties into what we're kind of communicating here. But more importantly, you allowed the person you asked for the book to feel smart, because what you were basically saying is, you have something that I want that will educate me, that by proxy is something that you already have and are educated on. Would you please share that with me? That's how you can kind of control this sort of interaction. It was a very, very, very intelligent way to navigate that climate without platitudes or all the gold and pedigree of hundreds of years of royalty that we didn't have in the United States. And you could basically placate, compliment, and patronize without insulting your political opponents by that kind of behavior. And we see this a lot in the channel. We see this behavior all the time with different vendors, different MSPs, kind of, you know, sort of quietly holding one another up and suggesting or publicly receiving information or assistance from others. You're making that other person feel and look smart. And it's a powerful feeling and a powerful way to manage other people. So we tie all this back. And of course, in a sales and marketing context, we could make a whole series of separate videos on this, but those probably already exist. But as that technical employee, wherever you're working, you start to realize that, like, I need to find a way to balance this when I'm working with clients so that I can make an individual end user feel rewarded and smart for deciding to reach out to me, but not shift too much of the burden of that experience to them, because I am a professional. I am, you know, a trusted professional. They're reaching out to me. And you run into, at this point, the potential problem we indicated at the beginning of the video that kind of ties back to this concept of jealousy or envy. And it's jealousy or envy of knowledge and solution, which is why we sometimes will find that when we are trying to make other people feel smart in a technical context, they get insulted and they feel that we're patronizing them. So I said a little earlier in this video, most higher order thinking mammals, animals, I'm not a nature person, I might use the wrong word there, but most higher order thinking creatures can exhibit signs that they get a dopamine hit from basically making the right choice. Well, another thing that most creatures who can think have demonstrated in one way or another that we can all observe, and you know this if you have a cat or a dog, is the concept of jealousy or envy. I'm kind of blending them together for this, but this idea and awareness that perhaps one individual in a situation has more or has less of something, probably more in the case of a dog, getting jealous that you're eating more. Actually, there's been some research that has shown that dogs can actually count and tell if dog A is getting a greater quantity of a treat than dog B, and get aggravated about it. So there you go. I think Lily can only really count up to 3, but who knows? Point is that we're all able as thinking creatures to recognize when someone or something else has more of something than we think we have. That may not always actually be true, but it's at least the perception is there. And it's enough of a human foible that many cultures have associated that with being a core human flaw. You know, the 7 deadly sins, there you go. That's one of them. It bears talking about here because I look at things like that and I think of them as sort of a fundamental reaction that a human is likely to have in that situation, regardless of their bias and upbringing. And in the case of tech support, especially when someone's asking you for help, you're automatically put in a position of power over them because you have both the knowledge and ability to render that help. And by their very act of asking for it, they don't. We see this in other situations, really anything where both ability and knowledge is not going to be something that the average person in the situation has. So maybe, you know, in a medical situation, a doctor or a nurse would have the knowledge and ability a regular person wouldn't. In a legal situation, a lawyer might have knowledge and ability the regular person wouldn't. A race car driver is going to have knowledge and ability that the regular person wouldn't. So it's not that the profession itself is inherently skewed towards that kind of thinking. It's you're a technical professional. You not only know things that your clients may not know, you can also do things that they objectively cannot do, which is why they're asking you for help. And in those situations, when we've already gone back to this idea that naturally we understand that people want to be rewarded for interacting with us and they want to feel smart, it's very easy to try and want to teach them or to give them information or to compliment them openly about their decision to work with you. And often, right, if you've worked in tech support, you know an example of where that's run afoul, where somebody's actually gotten aggravated at you for basically highlighting the fact that they reached out to you for support and how smart they were for doing that. And I say all of this because that's what makes this more nuanced. That's what makes this something that you need to learn how to manage. Take a step back. In sales, there's a concept that you never really want to insult the customer's previous purchase, even if it was not a good purchase and we all know it. And the idea behind that goes back to the idea of making someone feel smart. And sometimes the way that you make someone feel smart is not by highlighting when they were dumb, even if you are trying to do it in an empathetic way. Where I see this happen a lot with tech support professionals, and I've done it as well, is someone will express, maybe even admonish themselves for running into the situation that generated their need to reach out to you. Of course, what's our normal empathetic reaction? Hey, don't worry about it, or no problem, or all good, you know, whatever your language there is. I have made that mistake, or that happens all the time, or that's a common thing, or totally understandable how that happened to you. In all of those situations, of course, our goal is to connect with them and on both an empathetic and sympathetic level. And some people do respond to that very positively. And delivery is key. Delivery is key. But there's also a lot of times where what you're basically doing completely by accident is highlighting their incompetency. You're basically insulting their previous purchase. And so now you're not actually making them smart, and you're highlighting the fact that you have a solution. Even if you're saying you suffered from this, you're highlighting that you have a solution and they don't. And so you're triggering two things in their brain. You're triggering a response that basically they're feeling like, hey, this person's highlighting that I wasn't smart, and they have the solution and I don't. And you run the risk of triggering also their jealousy or their envy reflex, which combined together is really what produces that negative visceral reaction to you otherwise trying to help. And usually that response of, if not a big sigh or a huff that don't patronize me, the whole way it can go the wrong way. I bring all this up because if you're trying to learn this skill, that's a really easy thing to stumble into. And the true expertise, unless you are really able to master the delivery of highlighting the mistake, and you're very, very, very much able to completely cast the delivery of that on yourself and your own character flaw in almost a clown-like way, which is a very difficult skill to learn. So unless you're already a master at that, it's usually better to not really go down that path and instead empathize with their emotion. If you've listened to any sort of content that's been designed around how to approach customer support, that's what you'll see you're taught, is that you really want to empathize with their emotion. It's this idea of leading and pacing. You want to match their tone and their emotion, but keep your words positive. So what does this have to do with making somebody feel smart? What's the point of this whole video? So rewinding all this back to the beginning, when you are in that role, as I said before, there's plenty of content already in this in a sales and marketing context, but when you're in that technical support role, this is a really valuable tool because you can take somebody who is inherently frustrated and in pain and is not having a good experience, and you can reward them instantly reward them by the simple act of reaching out to you and your support. And then you can continue to reward them by being careful to empathize with their emotion without actually calling out the fact that they kind of goofed, which is why they're in this situation to begin with. And if you can navigate that properly and work to develop that skill at any level of support, whether you're entry level or expert level, you start finding that you're able to basically cultivate a following from your clients of users that prefer you, that want you, that ask for you, that recommend you, that give you CSAT. So that takes us to, we all know that person. Everybody already knows somebody like that at your company or at some company that all the users just mysteriously love. They love working with this person. And odds are it's because that's how this person naturally communicates. And it's a really powerful skill because once you start to really maximize and master your ability to make other people feel smart without making them feel dumb or insulted or envious of your knowledge, once you learn basically that skill set of how to ask someone else to borrow a book so that you can compliment them without insulting them with the compliment, that is how you win minds and influence people. And in tech support, that's also important because it's how we start to change user behavior. So I bring this all back to user behavior as we wrap up here, because ultimately that's what frustrates us in a tech support role. It's not really that stuff is breaking. I think we can rationalize that. A laptop pushed off a desk is probably going to break because it's a thing and it wasn't meant to do that. If it happens a lot, you might get sick of repairing laptops, but you're not really inherently mad at the thing for breaking. But we do get mad and frustrated at user behavior. That laptop that's falling off the desk and breaking over and over again. We're not mad at the laptop itself for breaking. We're mad at the user who keeps pushing it off the desk. We're mad at why it keeps breaking. You can tell a user over and over again, don't push that laptop off the desk. They may not pick up on that on their own just from, consequence action, which is why being able to influence their behavior is so important in a technical support role, because you're going to do something that a lot of support desks aren't really thinking about. you're actually going to improve your user's ability to consume whatever it is you're providing. When you start to elevate a user's ability to have more success with a product, a tool, or a service, they start to now associate the entire category of that product, service, or tool with being smart. Remember, we like that feeling. It's a primal feeling. And so this leads to end users and clients that will naturally start to modify their approach and behavior to basically be better aligned with what good looks like from you. And that'll make you feel smart. And everybody feels quite a bit better. Churn is reduced, CSAT improves, and your job's just a little bit less miserable. If you don't believe me, well, think back to your support career at any point. You've had a few end users that are already playing these tricks on you because they're your favorites. Doesn't really matter how much they call in. You know what I'm talking about. It's the people who you always feel really good after you get off the phone with them. And not because they're pleasant or funny, because they make you feel validated, they make you feel smart, they make you feel like you just won after you supported them. They've been playing this whole mental kung fu on you this whole time. It's time to start playing it back. Because if both of you leave a call feeling that way, that's incredibly powerful. And you can pretty much take that anywhere you want to take it, to any industry, any career, any customer you want. Have a great rest of your week. Start thinking a little bit more critically if you are making the people around you feel smart by virtue of their interactions with you. A small place to start with any of this. When your users reach out to you, phone, email, chat, text, whatever it is, make sure that in those first few moments, they feel instantly rewarded for contacting you. That's not the entirety of the skill you need to learn, but that's the easiest way to get started, is to just make them feel right away, I made the right choice today by contacting support and getting you right there in the queue. Glad I got you. I feel rewarded and immediately smart for doing that. Start there. Try and make every person you interact with next week feel that way, every interaction. You're going to get used to it. They're going to get used to it, and you can build on it. Be excellent.